the case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30th, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own, but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27th, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around a city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $17.40 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the runaway bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in February 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the February 2008 movie The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in February 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia. The case of Mitsy Sanchez. Mitsy Sanchez was born on August 10, 1992, in Vallejo, California. She grew up in a large with 2 brothers and a sister. As a child, Mitsy was cheerful and bright, enjoying time outdoors with friends and playing with her siblings. From a young age, she demonstrated independence, often walking to elementary school with her brother without adult supervision as the school was nearby. On August 10, 2000, Mitsy's 8th birthday, she was excited about the celebration party her family had planned. However, when she asked her mom if she could skip school, the request was denied. Upset, Mitsy left her home with her brother at around 7:30 a.m. The plan was for her to wait for her brother after classes, and they would walk home together. But when her brother went outside the school, he couldn't find Mitsy. Assuming she had already left without him, he headed home alone. However, when he arrived home, Mitsy had disappeared without a trace. Mitsy's older sister grew concerned when she realized Mitsy was missing, especially since her birthday party was supposed to take place that day. As her absence seemed unusual, the sister called their mother around 4 p.m. to report the situation. The mother immediately contacted Mitsy's school and confirmed that Mitsy had attended all her classes that day. However, when the mother reached out to family members and Mitsy's friends, no one had seen her after school. Mitsy's family became worried and started looking for her. Family, friends, and neighbors mounted a massive search operation. Some walked the streets, while others went door to door along the route from her home to school, asking locals if they had seen her. They also distributed flyers with information about Mitsy. Despite their extensive efforts, they were unable to find her, leading Mitsy's parents to call 911 for assistance. The police quickly joined the search and local media started covering the case. The news of Mitsy's disappearance spread quickly, not just in local news outlets but also across the state. Mitsy's family has given several interviews to raise awareness of her disappearance. Her mother desperately pleaded with them to return her daughter safely. The police received a lot of information, but none of it was useful. 24 hours after Mitsy went missing, the investigation had new clues. A man contacted the police to report finding bloody rags at a landfill. After further examination, experts discovered that the rags were actually bed sheets from a hotel in Vallejo. The evidence was sent to the lab for analysis, but it would take several days to obtain the results. Investigators also went to the hotel, but they were unable to confirm whether Mitsy was there. As the investigators waited for the lab results, they thoroughly searched the landfill for any additional clues, but they found nothing. However, the next day, August 12th, the police received a call that changed the course of the investigation. At around 11 a.m., a man called the police to report a disturbing incident. While driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara, he saw a little girl running towards his van, screaming that someone was chasing her. The girl quickly got into the van, and the driver saw a man running in their direction. A young girl escaped from her kidnapper and sought help from a van driver. As soon as she got into the truck, the kidnapper quickly fled the scene. The girl, who identified herself as Mitsy Sanchez, told the driver what had happened, and he immediately contacted the police. The officers quickly took Mitsy to a hospital for a medical examination. They also arranged for her to speak with her mother over the phone, and soon her relatives arrived at the hospital, where they were reunited with Mitsy. The van driver proved to be a valuable witness in the investigation. He was able to provide the police with the license plate number of the kidnapper's vehicle, which he had seen as it sped away. The truck driver happened to be on the road that day, which was lucky. If he hadn't been there, the kidnapper might have caught up with Mitsy. The police checked the license plate and discovered that the car belonged to 39-year-old Curtis Dean Anderson, a man with a history of crime. He had previous convictions for theft and kidnapping and was also suspected of other offenses. Police took a statement from Mitsy about what happened to her. Mitsy recounted that on August 10th, she was excited to finish school and head home. She was excited to finish school and head home to celebrate her birthday with her family. When her last class ended, she decided not to wait for her brother and walked home alone. As she walked, she noticed a car parked by the side of the road about a few hundred yards away. Inside, a man was watching her through the rearview mirror. The girl felt uncomfortable, but she was not worried because it was daytime and she was walking on a familiar street. In addition, because she was young, she was not aware of the potential risks posed by strangers. Mitsy was approached by a man who got out of his car and asked for her help. He claimed to have a leg injury from an accident and needed assistance in retrieving a roll of tape from under the car seat. Despite feeling uneasy, Mitsy agreed to help, as her parents had taught her to assist others in need. However, as soon as Mitsy reached for the tape, the man's intentions became clear. He pushed her into the car, covered her mouth, and slammed the door shut. Mitsy tried to scream, but it was too late. The man drove away, Mitsy to watch in horror as they passed by her home, where her family was preparing to celebrate her birthday. The man eventually stopped in a deserted parking lot, where he gave Mitsy new clothes and forced her to change. He then threw away her old clothes in a nearby trash bin. He warned Mitsy not to try to escape, claiming he had a gun and that no one had ever managed to escape from him. For the next few hours, Mitsy was driven to an unknown location. Mitsy demanded to know why she had been kidnapped, but the man's response was that he had gone through a similar experience as a child. When night fell, he stopped the car again and began covering the windows with rags to conceal their location. He then shackled Mitsy's leg with a chain and padlock. The man pulled out a bottle of alcohol and insisted that Mitsy drink some. Despite her initial reluctance, she eventually gave in. He took pictures of her using a camera. The perpetrator then lay down in the car to sleep. Fearing that she would be at his mercy if she fell asleep, Mitsy stayed awake and began thinking of an escape plan. Her chance came when she saw a police car driving past the parking lot. However, it was too far away, and she realized that even if she screamed, the officers would not be able to hear her. The next day, the perpetrator continued to drive Mitsy around the city, forcing her to sit on the floor of the car and covering her with sheets to conceal her from view. At one point, he briefly stepped out of the vehicle, giving Mitsy an opportunity to try and escape. She attempted to free her leg from the chain but quickly realized it was impossible. She also found a nail file and tried to use it to unlock the padlock, but unfortunately, it didn't work. When the perpetrator returned to the car and drove away, he made a disturbing claim. He had stopped by Mitsy's parents' house. Under the guise of a good citizen, he asked for flyers to distribute around town, further manipulating the situation. Mitsy was left feeling shocked and overwhelmed, knowing she had been so close to home, yet still remained in captivity. Over the next few hours, the perpetrator repeatedly stopped the car, getting in and out. Eventually, he drove to a remote area outside of town and parked. There, he committed a sexual assault against Mitsy, leaving her in a state of shock. Afterward, the perpetrator fell asleep. The next morning, he resumed driving, making several stops to buy cigarettes and alcohol. When he returned to the car and leaned into the cabin, an object fell out of his pocket. He warned Mitsy not to look, but she disobeyed. She glanced down and saw a large set of keys. Mitsy quickly realized that one of the keys could open the lock on her chain. Although afraid of the perpetrator's possible reaction, Mighty was brave enough to act. She grabbed the keys, selected one that seemed to fit the lock best, and tried to unlock it. To her relief, the key worked. Mitsy managed to free herself from the chain and moved towards the car door, which was the last barrier between her and freedom. To escape, She opened the window and tried to climb out. However, her body was exhausted, and her legs had almost no strength left. Using the last of my strength, she pushed herself upwards and finally jumped out of the car. As she moved around it, she spotted her kidnapper, who instantly saw her as well. He yelled for her to come back, but Mitsy had no intention of surrendering. She took off in the opposite direction, and her kidnapper started chasing after her. As she fled, she attempted to get help from passing cars by waving her hands and screaming, but all the cars ignored her pleas and kept driving by. Not losing hope, Mitsy kept running forward. In her desperate, finally she spotted a van and she ran towards it. Jumping in front of it to stop the driver. The driver quickly halted, and Mitsy climbed into the cabin, exhausted, dehydrated, and starving, but safe. At the hospital, she received the medical attention she needed, and her family soon arrived to be reunited with her. Mitsy's story quickly became top news in town. When she returned home, thousands of people gathered on her street, cheering and shouting birthday wishes she had missed while in captivity. Meanwhile, the police were searching for her kidnapper, whose location remained unknown. During the investigation, the police showed Mitsy's mother a photo of the suspect, and she recognized him. She had seen him twice before, once before Mitsy's abduction, when he was standing on their street, staring at their house, and again the day after Mitsy's disappearance, when he came to their home asking for flyers. Police eventually arrested the suspect, Curtis. He confessed to Mitsy that she was not his first victim and that no one had ever managed to escape him before. Curtis's careful planning and execution suggested he had experience with similar crimes. It is notable that Curtis had a prior conviction for kidnapping a woman in 1991, for which he served time until his release in November 1999. The trial began in April of the same year. Mitsy bravely testified in a crowded courtroom, recounting every detail of Curtis's crimes against her. Even though Curtis was there, Mitsy remained calm and completed his mission. As a result, Curtis received a 251-year prison sentence. However, this marked the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation. Detectives regularly visited Curtis in jail, questioning him about potential involvement in other crimes. One of these visits, they discovered that Curtis had confessed to a fellow inmate about kidnapping and murdering 8 additional girls. The inmate agreed to cooperate with the police, sharing Curtis's confession in detail. However, Curtis himself was reluctant to reveal all his secrets. Instead of denying the allegations, he attempted to negotiate privileges in exchange for information, speaking with detectives in riddles. As for Mitsy, she was constantly bullied and ridiculed by her classmates, labeling her the kidnapped girl. They even told her she should have died instead of being rescued. The constant bullying made her school years extremely difficult, which hindered her recovery from the traumatic experience. Mitsy could no longer handle the immense pressure. As a result, she turned to alcohol as a means of coping with stress, relying more and more on it. Eventually, she lost hope of returning to a normal life. However, a car accident after a party with friends changes her life forever. Mitsy suffered serious injuries, including a broken neck and arm, and spent 2 weeks in a coma. Upon waking up, she received news from her doctors. She was pregnant with a daughter. This gave Mitsy the power to change her life for the better. She decided to devote herself entirely to her daughter and also to helping other children who were victims of various crimes. Mitsy went on to found a non-profit organization that continues to help those in need to this day. As for Curtis, he passed away in February 2007 due to illness, just 6 years after being sentenced. The detectives' only regret was that they were unable to obtain full confessions from him regarding other cases he was suspected of being involved in. Notably, his son followed a similar path and was also convicted of murder. Unfortunately, the son's life was cut short in prison in February 2019. The case of Lorie Hacking, the pregnant woman whose body was found in a city landfill, highlights how even a seemingly insignificant lie can lead to serious and tragic consequences. Behind every lie lies a motive, whether it's a desire to avoid punishment, gain advantage, or simply to maintain appearances. In some cases, lies are used to protect confidentiality or spare someone's feelings. In the case of Lorie Sarr, the story began with a small deception that snowballed into a devastating tragedy. Her mysterious disappearance in February 2004 sent shockwaves through Salt Lake City. Her husband, Lorie Hacking, reported her missing, a massive search effort that captured national attention. However, the shocking truth behind Lorie's disappearance would soon come to light. Lorie Hacking's deceit stemmed from childhood trauma and a fear of not meeting others' expectations. As the details of his lies unraveled, the media frenzy intensified, with the case becoming the subject of numerous television talk shows and feature films. Lorie Sarr, also known by her married name Lorie Hacking, was born in 1976. The tragic circumstances of her disappearance shed light on the destructive power of dishonesty and the devastating impact it can have on individuals and their loved ones. On December 31st, in the quaint city of Fullerton, nestled in California, a girl began her journey in the most unlikely of places, a children's orphanage, where she was placed immediately after birth. Her origins shrouded in mystery with no trace of her birth parents. At the tender age of 2, fate smiled upon her as she was welcomed into the loving embrace of a religious couple, Thelma and Geraldo Suarez. Geraldo, hailing from the sun-kissed lands of Sao Paulo, Brazil, found himself teaching the intricacies of Portuguese and English at Sunny Hills High School. It was amidst the bustling streets of Rio de Janeiro in the early 70s where he crossed paths with Thelma. Their shared mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints cemented their bond, leading to a union in matrimony. Despite their devotion, biological children eluded them, but their hearts remained open to the blessings of adoption. Their journey brought them to Fullerton in the late 70s, where they embraced parenthood with open arms, welcoming Lorie into their lives. In 1987, another addition, a son named Paul, completed their family. However, life's journey took an unexpected turn, leading the couple down separate paths, and the adopted children found solace under Thelma's care. Relocating to the tranquil town of Orem, Utah, mother and children forged ahead. Lorie and Paul flourished, traversing the halls of local high schools and later venturing into the realms of higher education. Lorie in particular blossomed into a compassionate, spirited young woman, her warmth and kindness touching the lives of all who crossed her path. Amidst the tapestry of her upbringing, Lorie found love for the first time at the age of 19, a chapter in her life marked by the gentle whispers of romance and the promise of a future yet to unfold. Lorie's path intertwined with that of her future husband, Mark Douglas Hacking. Born in April 1976 in the heart of North Carolina, Mark hailed from a lineage of esteemed medical professionals. As the youngest of 3 sons in the illustrious Hacking family, Mark inherited a legacy of excellence. His father, Douglas Hacking, stood as a prominent pediatrician, while his mother, Helena, contributed her expertise as a nurse. Mark's older brothers, Scotty and Lance, carved their own paths of success in the realm of science. Mark exuded an aura of determination and ambition, mirroring the aspirations of his esteemed kin. With dreams of pursuing a medical career akin to his family members, Mark radiated care and attentiveness, embodying the essence of a devoted family man. It was under the serendipitous veil of fate that Lorie crossed paths with Mark, and from that moment their bond remained unbroken. After 5 years of nurturing their romance, the couple took the leap into matrimony, forging a life together within the quaint confines of Salt Lake City, Utah. By then, Lorie had already flourished in her career, ascending to the role of senior assistant manager in a prestigious company, while Mark, with honors adorning his academic journey, embarked on his medical odyssey at the University of Utah. Amidst their shared joy, the couple reveled in the anticipation of impending parenthood, with Lorie's pregnancy casting a radiant glow upon their lives. Plans for a new chapter unfurled as they prepared to relocate to North Carolina, where Mark would pursue his medical residency and Lorie her professional endeavors. Theirs was a tapestry of promise and potential, woven with dreams of a blissful future. Yet fate's cruel hand intervened on July 19, 2004, shattering their idyllic existence. Lorie, 3 months pregnant, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void of uncertainty and despair. Mark's frantic attempts to reach her on that fateful day were met with eerie silence, signaling the onset of a harrowing ordeal. As the days stretched into an agonizing abyss of unanswered questions, the mystery of Lorie's disappearance veiled their once bright future in a shroud of darkness. Several hours elapsed before Mark made his way to the police station, his heart heavy with worry as he reported the inexplicable disappearance of his 27-year-old pregnant wife. According to Mark's account, Lorie had ventured to a nearby park in the morning, a routine part of her pre-work exercise regimen, but failed to return home thereafter. Initially assuming she had proceeded directly to her workplace, Mark's concern deepened upon discovering Lorie had left her phone behind. As he recounted the events to attentive police officers, Mark's voice trembled with apprehension. However, protocol dictated that a formal search for a missing adult would commence only after a 24-hour period had elapsed since the disappearance. Undeterred by bureaucratic timelines, Mark resolved to initiate his search, driven by the fear that Lorie may have fallen ill and required assistance. Setting out to the park where Lorie had intended to visit that day, Mark's hopes were dashed upon finding her car parked at the neighborhood's periphery, yet no sign of Lorie in sight. Returning home, he embarked on a relentless quest, reaching out to friends, relatives, and colleagues in a desperate bid for information. Their collective response echoed his distress, with no one having seen or heard from Lorie on that fateful day. Word of Lorie's disappearance quickly spread, igniting a groundswell of community concern. Before law enforcement intervened, hundreds of individuals comprising relatives, friends, acquaintances, and concerned citizens rallied to join the search effort. Together, they combed the vicinity, engaging neighbors, local vendors, and passers-by in their quest for any semblance of information. While plastering the area with flyers adorned with Lorie's visage, a poignant plea for her safe return. On July 20th, as the official report of Lorie's disappearance emerged, the news swiftly reached the media, casting a pall of concern over Salt Lake City. In response, the relatives of the missing woman convened a press conference, their faces etched with worry, beseeching the community for assistance. Mark, Lorie's husband, stood at the forefront, his anguish palpable as tears streamed down his cheeks, imploring anyone with information about his pregnant wife's whereabouts to come forward. By nightfall, a groundswell of support had materialized, with nearly 1,000 individuals joining the search effort. As police scrutinized Lorie's abandoned car, a perplexing detail emerged. Despite Lorie's petite stature, the driver's seat had been adjusted to accommodate someone much larger, a discrepancy too glaring to ignore. Further confounding investigators, a key revelation surfaced during a search of the Hacking residence: the discovery of the car keys purportedly found in the park. The incongruity was glaring. How could the keys be within the home if Lorie, as Mark had claimed, had departed in the car and never returned? This turn of events immediately raised suspicions about Mark. He claimed that the keys had been left in the ignition when he discovered the car, so he simply took them out and brought them home. While this explanation wasn't enough to detain him, it certainly warranted closer scrutiny from law enforcement. Soon, suspicions about his involvement in his wife's disappearance were substantiated in a most unexpected manner. Overwhelmed by grief, Mark's behavior took a bizarre turn. The day after Lorie was reported missing, police received reports of Mark running naked through the city streets, his cries unintelligible. His distraught demeanor and erratic actions prompted a psychiatric evaluation, raising questions about his mental state. While many attributed his breakdown to the stress of his wife's disappearance, police speculated that it could have been a ploy to feign insanity and evade accountability. As Mark underwent psychiatric assessment, investigators obtained permission to conduct a thorough search of the couple's residence. What they discovered painted a chilling picture: traces of blood in the marital bedroom, alongside remnants of stained bedding. Curiously, a new mattress, purchased on the morning of July 19th, the day Lorie vanished according to Mark's account, had replaced the old one. Moreover, concealed within the closet lay a sizable kitchen knife, its blade bearing what appeared to be dried blood. But the most damning evidence awaited investigators in the living room. An envelope addressed to Mark lay conspicuously on a table, containing a letter purportedly written by Lorie herself. In the letter, Lorie accused Mark of betraying her trust throughout their marriage, declaring their need to part ways. This revelation cast a grim shadow over the investigation, suggesting a far darker truth behind Lorie's disappearance, one that hinted at betrayal and potential foul play. This revelation finally convinced law enforcement that Mark was directly implicated in his wife's disappearance. The only remaining task was to unravel the events of July 19th. A breakthrough in shedding light on the situation came from Mark's father, Douglas Hacking. According to Douglas, Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah nor become a certified psychologist. He had been expelled 2 years prior, shortly after marrying Lorie. Fearful of disappointing his beloved and his family, Mark continued to masquerade as a student, fabricating assignments and defending his diploma in a parade that snowballed out of control. Mark's confession to his father made just a month before the tragedy laid bare the extent of his deceit. He attributed his actions to familial pressure, feeling compelled to match the success of his relatives in the medical field. As the sole breadwinner in their family, Lorie remained oblivious to the truth, with Douglas unknowingly enabling Mark by providing financial support. When the time came for Mark to defend his diploma, Douglas arranged an interview at a medical school in North Carolina, only to discover Mark's lack of credentials. Despite Douglas's insistence that Mark come clean to Lorie, he persisted in his deception, claiming acceptance to the medical school on the premise of his fictitious psychology degree. Unbeknownst to Mark, Douglas took matters into his own hands and divulged the truth to Lorie's sister. Shocked by the revelation, Lorie grappled with the betrayal of 2 years' worry worth of lies from her husband, compounded by the fact that she was carrying his child. Wrestling with her shattered trust, Lorie confided in her closest friend, seeking solace and guidance in the midst of overwhelming uncertainty. On July 25th, 6 days following Lorie's disappearance, Mark, confined to a psychiatric hospital, was visited by his older brothers, where he divulged a chilling confession. He had taken the life of his pregnant wife, Lorie, with a .22 caliber rifle. However, he withheld specific details initially, leaving investigators to piece together the grim events that transpired in the Hacking household. During a search of the local hospital's dumpster, authorities uncovered a spring mattress, meticulously cut into pieces, stained with blood and dark hair, and expertise later confirmed to belong to Lorie. Mark hinted to his brothers that he had similarly dismembered Lorie's body, bagged it, and disposed of it in a dumpster. Despite exhaustive efforts, no trace of her remains surfaced, prompting a massive search of the city's landfill by police and volunteers. Amidst mounting evidence of Mark's culpability, legal complexities loomed. Though law enforcement harbored no doubts regarding his involvement, the absence of a body posed challenges. Nevertheless, on August 2nd, Mark faced formal charges of first-degree murder and obstructing an investigation, leading to his transfer to a mental health facility within the jail. A grim discovery on August 9th marked a critical breakthrough. Human remains were unearthed at the landfill, confirmed through expert examination to be Lorie's. Subsequent investigations revealed a harrowing narrative. On July 18th, Lorie penned a note to Mark expressing her intent to divorce him upon discovering his web of lies, fabrications about his education, aspirations, and reliance on familial support. Unwilling to accept Lorie's decision, Mark resorted to an unthinkable act of violence. In the dead of night, as Lorie slept, he callously ended her life with a single gunshot to the head. What followed was a calculated effort to conceal his heinous crime, orchestrating a facade of her disappearance. As legal proceedings unfolded, initial plans for seeking the death penalty underscored the gravity of Mark's actions, casting a shadow of justice over a tragic saga of deceit and destruction. For Mark, however, lingering doubts persisted regarding his awareness at the time of the crime. Subsequently, the penalty was revised to life imprisonment. Only in April 2005, under mounting evidence and legal counsel's advisement, did the accused confess to the murder. Yet, he remained unable to articulate a motive for his actions. Tearfully, he lamented Lorie's significance in his life, expressing profound fear of losing her. On that fateful night, he claimed to have lost control, seized by a delirium that led him to fatally shoot his pregnant wife as she slept. Mark attributed his mental instability to familial pressures, which he perceived as relentless demands for academic excellence and unattainable standards. Following his university withdrawal, he bore the weight of shame for failing to meet these expectations, spiraling into a web of deceit from which he could not escape. Throughout court proceedings, Mark appeared in a bulletproof vest, facing incessant death threats. On June 6, 2005, the defendant was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, eligible for parole no sooner than 2035. Despite Mark and his legal team's appeals, all attempts to overturn the verdict were fruitless. Upon hearing the verdict, the murderer himself acknowledged the prison as his rightful abode, acknowledging the impossibility of fully atoning for his actions. The consequences of his unfathomable crime reverberated, leaving irreparable scars on the lives of all involved. Lorie's family made the poignant decision to erase the name Hacking from her headstone, laying her to rest under her maiden name, Suarez. For Thelma, this symbolic act served to sever ties with the man who had robbed her of her daughter and the promise of a future grandchild. A year into his incarceration, authorities discovered that Hacking was profiting from the sale of personal items, including autographs, palm prints, and even prison letterheads, on an online murder auction website. Upon being interviewed, Hacking voluntarily ceased this activity and expressed remorse for his actions. Remarkably, in the years following his imprisonment, Hacking maintained correspondence with his former mother-in-law, Thelma Suarez. Despite the deep anguish of her loss, Thelma, guided by her faith, extended forgiveness to her son-in-law and endeavored to find solace amidst the enduring pain. The tragic case of Lorie Suarez became the focal point of an episode in the television series Escape. It also sparked extensive discussions on various talk shows and documentary projects, including being featured as the inaugural episode of the crime television series Lies Worth Dying For. Furthermore, in 2014, the second season of My Dirty Little Secret dedicated an episode to the murder of Lorie Hacking. The case of Brianna Zunino. A lot of people are concerned that an autopsy is scheduled today to identify a woman's body that was found in Reno, Nevada on Friday. There is a possibility that it could be the missing college student, Brianna Denison. The body was found in a field on the edge of the campus of the University of Nevada, which is less than 10 miles from the house where Denison was last seen in February. Brianna Zunino Denison, a vibrant 19-year-old college student with a bright future, vanished without a trace, sending shock waves through the community and igniting a relentless search for answers. As news of Brianna's disappearance spread, an army of volunteers, law enforcement agencies, and concerned citizens came together, determined to bring her home safely. Brianna's family and friends, gripped by fear and uncertainty, clung to hope while sharing stories of her infectious laughter, unwavering spirit, and love for life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months as the search intensified. The quest for answers led investigators down a dark and twisted path, uncovering a heinous series of crimes. Law enforcement tirelessly pursued leads, meticulously piecing together the puzzle surrounding Brianna's disappearance. Their dedication and determination remained unwavering in their pursuit of justice. This is the story of Brianna Zunino Denison, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire. Brianna Zunino Denison was born on March 29, 1988 to Jeff Denison and Bridget Denison. Her mother lovingly called her Breezy because she reminded her of a refreshing breeze on a cool summer day. When Brianna was 6 years old, her father passed away, which was a difficult time for the family, as the loss of a loved one always is. However, she persevered through the pain with the support of her loved ones. She spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and her mother's native town of Mendocino, California. Brianna's passion for traveling and world cultures took her to Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. She studied abroad in Rome, Italy, for a year with her family. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life became part of her radiant personality. Brianna was raised in a tradition that valued children as the most precious possessions. Her relatives and close friends instilled in her the importance of being a loving, spiritual, respectful, and trusting human being. She had a deep affection for children and animals, particularly her dog, Ozzy. Brianna graduated from Reno High School in February 2006 and was a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College, where she was majoring in child psychology. On January 20th, 2008, Brianna returned home to Reno from sunny Santa Barbara during the winter break to visit some friends and family. She and her friends had attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a travel agency that catered to students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno, which Brianna had reportedly attended in the past. On that specific day, she was last observed alive at approximately 4 a.m. Pacific time at her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus on McKay Court in Reno. She had gone there to sleep after attending a party at the Sands Regency on North Arlington Avenue. When her friend woke up the next morning around 9 a.m., Brianna was nowhere to be found. A small bloodstain was noticed on the pillow where Brianna had slept that night, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were all left at the house, which prompted her friend to alert Brianna's parents and local authorities. When investigators arrived, they assessed the crime scene. In the following days, detectives conducted a forensic investigation of the McKay Court residence, where Brianna was staying. When she was abducted, they found DNA on a doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The investigators were able to confirm that the blood on the pillow belonged to Brianna and began focusing on a kidnapping scenario. The detectives began searching the University of Nevada, Reno area for Brianna, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the search efforts. The DNA found on the doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was linked to at least 2 sexually motivated attacks in the same area in the previous months, one on November 13th and the second on December 16th, 2007. On January 29th, 2008, a woman from Reno claimed that she knew another victim who had revealed that she was raped at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada, Reno campus in October 2007. However, the victim had not reported the crime. The investigators released a description of the potential suspected perpetrator based on this information, which was considered a positive lead. Identifiers used by women who had been sexually assaulted by the suspect were used to track down the perpetrator. The detectives began interviewing nearly 100 registered sex offenders who live within a mile of the McKay Court home, but none seemed to be responsible for Brianna's disappearance. Around 1,700 people, including Nevada's then First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, wife of then Governor Jim Gibbons, volunteered to participate in a physical search of a 100-square-mile area to find Brianna, who went missing, but to no avail. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez in Reno was just returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant. As he was walking by the road, he noticed bright orange-colored fabric standing out among a pile of discarded tree limbs lying in a ditch near a Reno business park. When he approached closer, he discovered neon orange socks, which were attached to feet, which at first he thought was a mannequin, but later turned out to be a woman. Jimenez had heard about Brianna Denison's kidnapping, but didn't think the victim resembled the photographs he had seen on billboards. Jimenez did not have a mobile phone, so he promptly returned to his workplace, EE Technologies, to call the Reno police. When the police arrived at the South Reno lot, Jimenez was informed that the victim was Brianna Denison, as an autopsy report had confirmed that the body found in a field near a Reno business park was hers. Brianna had been assaulted and killed. A piece of underwear was also found near Brianna's body, along with DNA evidence from the perpetrator and an unknown female. The police believed that the underwear did not belong to Brianna and might have been left there too to taunt the investigators. The police then asked anyone who recognized the underwear as theirs to come forward, as they might have information about the perpetrator's identity, but no one came forward. On January 29, 2008, the Reno police released a description of the unknown perpetrator. The person in question was also linked to at least 2 sexual assaults in November and December 2007, and a woman claimed to have been raped in a parking lot in October. previous victims had provided enough detailed information for the police to sketch a suspect. An item of underwear was found near Denison's body, along with the killer's DNA and the DNA of an unidentified woman. The police stated that the item of clothing did not belong to Denison and may have been left near her body to taunt the investigators. The police are asking anyone who recognizes the item of clothing as theirs to come forward, as they may know the identity of the perpetrator. On Tuesday, November 25, 2008, 27-year-old James Michael Bella from Sparks, Nevada was arrested and taken into custody at the Washoe County Jail. He was charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Bella was apprehended while he was dropping off his son at the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. Bella had already provided the police with a DNA sample collected from a doorknob in Brianna's friend's house. The detectives also discovered that Bella was a former Marine and had been previously arrested in February 2001 for threatening his former girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. On Wednesday, November 26, 2008, during a press conference held by the Reno Police Department, it was confirmed that the DNA collected from Bella matched the DNA found at the crime scene, positively linking him to the murder of Brianna Denison and a previous sexual assault. It was also revealed that a friend of his girlfriend had turned in Bella via the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after Bella's girlfriend had confided to this friend that she had found underwear unknown to her in Bella's truck, as they were coming back from Washington State, where Bella had taken a job in March 2008. News media reports of Brianna's case, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle used in another rape, the month before Brianna's abduction began circulating. Bella was questioned by detectives about his atrocity after the secret witness tip came in, but he denied his involvement and declined to provide a DNA sample. Bella's girlfriend was also questioned and gave police permission to obtain DNA from her 4-year-old son, whom Bella had fathered. The test confirmed that his direct relative, Bella in this case, had left a DNA sample collected at the home where Brianna Denison was abducted, and at the other rape that had taken place the prior month. On his way to Washington, it was also revealed that Bella had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the previous sexual assault. At the press conference, officials mentioned that the vehicle was being returned to Reno to be searched and used as evidence in the case against him. On Thursday, May 27, 2010, Bella was found guilty of the murder of Brianna Denison, and after deliberating for about 9 hours, the jury returned a guilty verdict for all counts against Bella, which included kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The defense attorneys argued against the death penalty, stating that Bella suffered an abusive childhood due to an alcoholic father, that he had been a productive member of society before his crimes, and that he was a model prisoner. However, the jurors did not accept these mitigating factors and handed out the death sentence. On July 30, 2010, Bella was sentenced to 4 additional life sentences for multiple counts of rape and kidnapping associated with attacks on 2 victims before Brianna's abduction and murder. Over the years, Bella's appeals have been denied. The story of Brianna Zunino Denison is one of resilience, heartbreak, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Brianna's family, who faced unimaginable pain and uncertainty, stood strong in their fight for justice. Their unwavering determination became a beacon of hope for others facing similar tragedies. The legacy of Brianna's story reaches far beyond her case. It has sparked crucial conversations, inspired community initiatives, and brought awareness to the issues of violence and safety. Law enforcement's tireless efforts ultimately led to the apprehension and conviction of the individual responsible for Brianna's abduction and murder. Their dedication and unwavering commitment to finding justice showcase the power of teamwork and determination. As we remember Brianna, we hold on to the memories of her vibrant spirit, her love for life, and the impact she had on those who knew her. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and standing up against violence. In the end, Brianna Zunino Denison's legacy will live on, not only through the love of her family and friends, but through the collective efforts to create a safer world for others. May her memory continue to inspire change and hope. Rest in peace, Brianna Zunino Denison. The case of Chris Watts. Sean and Ruzachak and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in February 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen, and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Sean and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shanann and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shanann had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shanann defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shanann was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shanann was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shanann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shanann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shanann loved her job, and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia de Rosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shanann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shanann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction, so she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shanann was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shanann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shanann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shanann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shanann and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shannon was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shannon felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shannon felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shannon sent a heartbreaking text to her friend explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches facing away from each other. Shannon suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shannon too much to do that. But Shannon was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shannon, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shannon and that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shannon was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shannon proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shannon was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shannon came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shannon soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shannon opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shannon was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shannon returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shannon entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shannon's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shannon missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shannon, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shannon's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shannon's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shannon would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shannon's friends contacted her husband, Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shannon might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shannon's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shannon was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shannon and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shannon's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shannon and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer. But unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shannon and Chris's home, the officer found Shannon's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shannon's friend Nicole. But Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shannon's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. A camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannon's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannon or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Sean hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shannon's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Sean might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Sean and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Sean during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shannon, and to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Sean. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Sean and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shannon's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Sean was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Sean emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Sean but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, This excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughter's bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed out outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann and in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Humans are inherently doubtful and covetous beings. When confronted with perfection, their instinct is to seek out imperfections. In the absence of any, they often endeavor to fabricate them. The calamity to be recounted today was observed by a vast audience, yet no one was able to assist the seemingly flawless girl, who as a result became handicapped. Tsinghua University, often referred to as the Chinese Harvard, was hosting a distinguished performance in partnership with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra. This event held significant prominence. Gracefully attired pairs made their entrance into the majestic theater. Men in impeccably cut black suits adorned with gleaming cufflinks, and women in stunning full-length gowns clutching petite handbags. They exchanged smiles and engaged in polite conversations as they proceeded to their seats. Tsinghua University students poised to showcase their talent that evening faced immense pressure. One student, Zhu Ling, was confronting an especially daunting challenge. She was about to deliver a 6-minute solo poised to be the defining 6 minutes of her life. The audience potentially included professors, prospective future employers, and benefactors, all key figures for her career prospects, heightening the stakes. Any error or mishap was not an option. She needed to captivate them and leave a lasting impression with her performance. Her goal was to immerse herself in the rhythm and embody the essence of the ancient Chinese musical instrument, the jiqin. Revered as the instrument of the wise and favored by literati and intellectuals, those who mastered it were invariably seen as genial and perceptive. The jiqin, a symbol of prestige, boasts a rich history. One of these venerable instruments from the Song dynasty fetched $22 million, ranking it among the most valuable. To soothe Ling's nerves, numerous friends positioned themselves near the stage, their anxiety nearly matching hers, having witnessed all she had endured over the past 2 months. For this moment, Zhu Ling's entire existence up to now had been devoted to these 6 minutes. She had almost jeopardized her well-being for this event. Her nerves were so frayed that in 3 days preceding her solo, she scarcely consumed any food. Stress-induced stomach pains plagued her, and sleep was elusive, making it hard for her to keep her eyes. Her vision began to blur. Finally, Zhu Ling ascended the stage, greeted the audience with a bow, sat down, and commenced playing the guqin. In those initial moments, her friends held their breath. But soon, the tension eased, and they found themselves enveloped in the music. Zhu Ling's stage presence that evening betrayed no sign of her nerves. She seemed to become one with the melody. Her hands glided effortlessly, coaxing out exquisite sounds that resonated throughout the theater. Some of her friends were even brought to tears. It appeared that Zhu Ling had channeled all her accumulated stress and anxiety of the past 2 months into her performance, transforming it into a form of emotional release. As the 6 minutes concluded, the audience burst into applause. Zhu Ling gave a deep bow, offered a smile, and exited the stage. Unbeknownst to her, her best friend was in the crowd, smiling broadly and clapping so vigorously that her hands turned red. Yet her expression also showed a hint of nervousness. That night, Zhu Ling opted out the festivities to return home and rest. The dissipation of stress left her feeling utterly drained. In the shower, she began washing her hair calmly. Glancing at her hand, she noticed a clump of hair passing through it. Running her hand through her hair again brought a sense of urgency. She pulled back the shower curtain and dashed to the mirror. Her reflection revealed an exhausted face and small, irregular bald spots resembling the aftermath of a carelessly wielded razor. This was merely the onset. In the following weeks, Zhu Ling's condition would deteriorate further, leaving her confined to a wheelchair and bereft of ability, unable to move, speak, or even control facial muscles. She transformed from a highly promising Tsinghua University student into someone with the cognitive capacity of a 6-year-old child. This entire wasn't an illness, nor was it a genetic anomaly. Zhu Ling was experiencing something caused by another individual. For ordinary students, gaining admission to Harvard was more likely than to Tsinghua, especially for those native to China. The local acceptance rate stands at a mere 0.4%, making it more accessible to international students. The university operates on an annual budget of $5 billion. It's an institution where influential political figures' daughters and wealthy businessmen, sons, receive their education. Each of them is exceptionally intelligent and well-educated with high intellectual capacities. The real challenge isn't just in securing admission, it's surviving the intense competition and rivalry among the students. Some alumni have admitted that to stay at the forefront, they engaged in various manipulations, betraying comrades, engaging in deceit, and stabbing others in the back, all driven by the unyielding competitive spirit fostered at this institution. In 1994, Zhu Ling was among the 31 chemistry undergraduates at Sing University. She ranked in the top 3 of her cohort, which consisted of 20 males and 11 females. Zhu Ling was often regarded as the epitome of excellence, the cream of the crop among students. Indeed, Zhu Ling was not only intelligent, but also tall and striking in appearance. Everyone foresaw a bright future for her, destined for significant accomplishments. Zhu Ling also had a charismatic and assured presence. Her arrival in the dormitory sparked envy among others. She had a knack for attracting a circle of friends and admirers, thanks to her warm demeanor towards others. She roamed the campus, attended lectures diligently, completed her assignments, and many marveled at her seemingly boundless energy. However, after a few months, a peculiar and unexplainable decline in Zhu Ling's condition began to be observed by all. She appeared less strained even during graduation week. But suddenly, Zhu Ling seemed to vanish. She began arriving later than her peers and consistently looked exhausted in lectures. Sitting there, she'd sweat as if overheating. Zhu Ling struggled to concentrate on the class content. Severe stomach pain plagued her, leading many, including her instructors, to believe it was stress-related. Seeking relief, Zhu Ling went to the school clinic for pain relievers, but they provided minimal respite. What started as minor lateness escalated to her ceasing classes entirely. Concerned friends decided to visit her dormitory, which she shared with 3 other girls. They found her in bed, shivering and moaning in agony with clumps of dark hair scattered on the pillow. Alarmed, her classmates urged her to consult a physician, but Zhu Ling dismissed their concerns. She insisted she was merely stressed and would return to classes the next day, assuring them that everything would normalize by semester's end. The once impeccable Zhu Ling was now unrecognizable. Her complexion had turned ghostly pale. Lips took on a purplish tint. She resembled a specter haunting the campus. Her movements were sluggish. Each step seemed to inflict excruciating pain. Most of her hair had shed, leaving her nearly bald and compelling her always to wear something on her head for concealment. Occasionally, Julian's vision would blur, leading to temporary blindness for hours at a time. Various hypotheses regarding Julian's deteriorating condition spread across campus. Some conjectured it might be due to illnesses like cancer or alopecia, known for causing hair loss, or perhaps an autoimmune disorder. Yet darker speculations emerged. Many students linked Zhu Ling's decline to stress stemming from a dispute with her close friend, Sunny. It seemed oddly coincidental that the change in Zhu Ling coincided with their falling out. After missing an orchestra rehearsal for a challenging piece, Zhu Ling faced unexpectedly harsh criticism. Sunny Fly informed the instructor that Zhu Ling had skipped because she felt overly skilled, implying the others needed to elevate their abilities to match hers. Realizing such maliciousness in real life was quite overwhelming for Zhu Ling. Different speculations circulated among university students. Some hinted that Zhu Ling, being a chemistry student, might be secretly conducting groundbreaking experiments. However, would a highly driven student risk self-harm? Bai Jin A, from Peng University, and a friend since middle school, decided to visit her in the hospital with a fruit basket. On entering her room, Bai Jin was stunned and compelled to flee. It wasn't fear of infection, but rather seeing his classmate in such a dire state that overwhelmed him. How could a vibrant 20-year-old transform into this shadow so quickly? What illness could strip Zhu Ling of all she had worked for? The medical team found her condition baffling. Just months earlier, Zhu Ling had been in peak health. Now she lay almost hairless, connected to multiple machines with tubes protruding from her nose and mouth. Her body convulsed and face showed partial paralysis. A look of silent desperation marked her wide eyes. The sight was distressing. Even the slightest touch caused excruciating pain and more erratic movements. It seemed even her hospital gown tormented her skin. Sensing his friend's silent plea for help, Bai Jin read the desperate message in her eyes, a look he would never forget. Seeking answers alongside Zhu Ling's parents, Bai Jin probed the doctors for a diagnosis, but they were equally perplexed. They delved into the onset of her illness. Initially, about a month or two earlier, Zhu Ling experienced stomach aches, resembling spasms which came and went within a week. The pain intensified to the point that it forced her to bend over in agony. Often, she would lay on the ground curled up in a fetal position. Initially, her remedy involved consuming large amounts of Chinese herbal tea. Yet, the pain escalated, eventually causing her to lose consciousness. Zhu Ling, burdened by her demanding university schedule, delayed seeking medical attention, hoping the symptoms would subside. Then her vision began failing intermittently, first blurring and then completely vanishing for hours. Subsequently, her hair started falling out, an especially traumatic symptom for any young woman. The situation deteriorated further, leading to her hospitalization just days before Christmas. It was her first time in hospital care. During that month, her parents remained steadfast by her side as she received treatment. The medical team tested her for arsenic and mercury poisoning. However, the results showed nothing abnormal. Intriguingly, a doctor from a different hospital recalled a similar poisoning case from the 1960s and suggested the possibility of thallium poisoning. However, Zhu Ling denied any exposure to thallium in her studies. The hospital then reached out to Tsinghua University to investigate which chemical substances Zhu Ling might have encountered in her capacity as a chemistry student. Despite this inquiry, her medical records revealed no exposure to chemicals that could trigger such symptoms. This left her condition an enigma to the medical staff. Remarkably, after a month, Zhu Ling's health appeared to improve, and she requested permission to resume her studies. She was eager to sit for exams and anxious not to waste the entire semester. Her parents were adamantly opposed to her returning to university, fearing that stress was the underlying cause of her illness. Yet, Zhu Ling feigned significant recovery and went back to classes in February. Unfortunately, by March, her condition had deteriorated dramatically again, resulting in readmission to the hospital. This time, so debilitated that continued university attendance seemed impossible. She couldn't even speak. Jean, disillusioned with the local medical community's inability to provide answers, took the initiative. He reached out to medical experts not just in China but globally. Zhu Ling's symptoms were transit various languages, and he posted these on specialized medical forums online. In less than half an hour, he received his response. Over the next few days, around 2,000 emails poured in from 18 different countries. The respondents weren't mere internet users. Many were affiliated with national medical institutions and specialized in toxicology. The consensus among almost all of them was alarming. Thallium poisoning. The symptoms pointed to a deliberate, methodical attempt to poison Zhu Ling designed to inflict slow, excruciating agony. Thallium, a dense and highly poisonous metal, was once used in rat poisons, but has been banned in major countries including China and the USA. In the early 20th century, it was used as a lice treatment known to cause hair loss. Its array of symptoms is so vast that it often leads to misdiagnosis by doctors, and its detection is usually alarmingly delayed. Thallium doesn't leave visible marks like bruises or wounds, making it harder to spot. The poisoning unfolds in stages. Initial stomach discomfort escalates to severe pain, then trembling, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. Subsequently, the victim experiences intense skin pain, akin to severe burns, where even the slightest touch feels excruciating. Clothing and bed linens become sources of torment. The final stage involves neurological symptoms, including involuntary motor disturbances, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis, culminating in cognitive decline and mental impairment. Tragically, in Zhu Ling's case, this meant a regression from a top student at China's most prestigious university to possessing the mental capacities of a 6-year-old child. BG Zhen, in collaboration with Zhu Ling's parents, sifted through the multitude of emails and promptly conveyed their findings to Zhu Ling's medical team. Yet the doctors were skeptical of the diagnosis posited by online contributors. They emphasized that detecting thallium in the body without specific tests was not feasible. Testing for thallium involved sending the patient's blood to a lab equipped for such an analysis. Moreover, they pointed out that thallium is a rare, tightly controlled substance, not easily obtainable. The doctors also mentioned that if Zhu Ling's condition was indeed due to thallium poisoning, an antidote would likely be ineffective at this advanced stage of the disease. This revelation left Zhu Ling's family and friends in shock. The pressing question then became, who would want to harm Zhu Ling? A hypothesis emerged that the intended targets might have been her parents, given their high-profile occupations. Her father was a senior engineer at the national agency, a position that could involve sensitive information. Her mother was an engineer at a prominent Chinese company. However, this line of inquiry eventually reached a dead end. The primary task was to determine how the poison entered Zhu Ling's system, especially since no one else on campus exhibited similar symptoms. This rolled out the possibility of thallium vapors, suggesting that Zhu Ling either ingested or came into direct contact with the substance. Meanwhile, during Zhu Ling's hospitalization, her personal items were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The stolen items included her shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, bath soap, and even her water glass. Intriguingly, the perpetrator seemed solely interested in Zhu Ling's possessions, an unusual incident in such a prestigious university's dormitory. With no surveillance cameras on campus at that time, an investigation was imperative. Students lived in gender-specific rooms, and access to the women's dormitory was restricted to current female students of Tsinghua University. Neither alumni nor graduate students or professors had entry into the living quarters of over 100 young female students. Police initiated a thorough investigation into over 20 vendors known to supply thallium, a substance still used in manufacturing optical lenses, electronics, and other products. Scrutinizing their procurement records, they discovered that one supplier had provided alum to Tsinghua University's chemistry department for research. The investigation revealed that only a select group within the university had access to this compound: 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 senior undergraduates. Consequently, the perpetrator likely had a role in thallium-based experiments and had the opportunity to take personal items from Zhu Ling's room. As the investigation progressed, the professors and graduate students were quickly excluded as suspects due to their lack of access to the women's dormitory. This narrowed suspicion to the 2 senior students, 1 male and 1 female. Since the male student couldn't have entered the female residence area, suspicion fell on the female student. Astonishingly, this student was none other than Sun Wei, also known as Sunny. She was not only Zhu Ling's best friend and roommate, but now the prime suspect in her attempted murder. The situation posed a baffling question. Why would Sunny, with a bright future ahead, risk everything in such a serious manner? Acquaintances of both young women mentioned that Zhu Ling had recently triumphed over Sunny in the student elections. Sunny was not known for tolerating defeat gracefully. She possessed an argumentative nature and had deceived her closest companion on several occasions. As Zhu Ling advanced and received greater acclaim, Sunny grew progressively more agitated. Zhu Ling's individual performance at the Beijing Philharmonic served as a catalyst for tension in their relationship. Zhu Ling was attractive, highly skilled, and esteemed by both peers and faculty members alike. This probably fueled Sunny's jealousy even more. Sunwei was questioned for 8 hours straight before her parents came to take her home. Her family had significant influence at Tsinghua University. Her father played a key role in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee, and her grandfather was a former vice chairman. Many of her relatives held positions in government or academic roles at top state universities. Consequently, Zhu Ling's case remained unresolved for quite some time. Sun Wei, one of the primary individuals associated with the incident, maintained her innocence. She claimed that the police had cleared her of any suspicion. Regardless, Sun Wei legally changed her name and birth date, married an American, and relocated to the U.S., where she lived without restrictions. Meanwhile, Ling's diagnosis came too late. It was eventually confirmed that thallium had caused her mysterious illness. By the time it was detected, the levels of thallium in her body were extraordinarily high. The antidote, Prussian blue, proved ineffective due to the advanced stage of poisoning. Ling was declared permanently disabled with irreversible nerve damage. She now has a child's mental capacity, experiences facial paralysis, and is bound to a wheelchair. Later on, Ling's family received $14,000 from the hospital due to misdiagnosis and mishandling of her case. The closure of the case by the police occurred quietly without notifying Ling's family, which only added to their tragedy and suspicions. Zhu Ling lived until she was 50 years old before passing away. Her parents found solace in the fact that she could live so long in such a state. Unfortunately, the individual responsible for her condition was never brought to justice. The case of Sarah Yarro. Sarah Yarro was born in Portland on June 12, 1975. Shortly after, her parents relocated to Federal Way, a suburb of Seattle, where she grew up with 2 siblings, forming a strong bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, Sarah demonstrated a keen interest in music and ballet, spending considerable time honing her skills. Her academic prowess earned her a spot in a school program that allowed her to travel to New Zealand twice. As she entered her teenage years, Sarah joined the cheerleading team at her high school, where she developed a large social circle. She was renowned for her kind and compassionate nature, often lending a helping hand to those in need. On Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team at the school building where a bus would pick them up for an event. She drove her father's car to the school, but arrived at the wrong time, thinking the bus would arrive at 8 a.m. when it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. Even when the bus arrived, Sarah was still missing. Her friends found this strange, but they had no way to contact her since they didn't have mobile phones at the time. Around the same time, 2 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds when they noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath, and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman lying unresponsive on the ground who they thought might be dead. The children rushed back home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents returned to the scene with them. Meanwhile, the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child remembered seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area, and since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. After a while, he spotted a similar car, but unfortunately, he quickly lost sight of it and was unable to find it again. At the same time, the parents of the other child rushed to the school, where they discovered the young woman lying on the ground, likely dead. They promptly entered the school building and contacted the police. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed the young woman's death. They also quickly identified her as Sarah. The police deduced that the victim had been strangled based on the marks on her neck. Some of her personal belongings, including her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found nearby. However, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her vehicle and then dragged her behind the trees. The body was sent to forensic experts for examination, and the police initiated their search for evidence. As a first step, they interviewed everyone who was in the school premises and its surrounding area. The two boys who discovered Sarah provided a rough description of the man who emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall, approximately 20-year-old man with shoulder-length, reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black trousers. Soon, the police located another witness, and this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A man out for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. He saw a girl lying next to the bushes with a man hovering over her. The girl was completely still, and the witness initially thought the couple was engaging in intimate behavior in that spot. However, when he ran back through the area in the opposite direction a few minutes later, both the man and the girl were still there in the same positions. At no point did he suspect that a serious crime was being committed. The witness, a recent immigrant to the United States from a different cultural background, was uncertain about typical behavior in the country. Despite this, he was able to provide the police with a rough description of the attacker, which matched the accounts given by the children who found Sarah's body. The police interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school, but no other useful information came to light. The medical examiners who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body determined that the cause of death was strangulation. It appeared that the attacker had used his own socks to strangle her. A severe head wound was also found, and experts believed that Sarah had lost consciousness due to this blow, which correlated with the runner's account of seeing her lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts analyzed Sarah's clothing and discovered traces of male DNA on nearly all her garments. However, at that time in 1991, there was no DNA database to match these samples against, so investigators had to rely on direct comparisons with DNA samples from specific suspects. Another significant finding was that although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor reported no signs of sexual assault on her body. Based on this information, investigators pieced together their own theory of what happened. Since Sarah had arrived at the school almost an hour early and she was alone in the parking lot, it's likely that her attacker saw her, waited for her to leave the car, struck her on the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. The attacker then dragged her body behind some trees where it was later found. The assailant removed some of her clothing, engaged in inappropriate acts, and eventually strangled her using her own socks. When the children who found Sarah's body reported the car they thought the attacker had fled in, detectives started searching for a Chevrolet Nova. They soon found one, but the driver proved to have an alibi. He had just delivered donuts that morning, and his DNA didn't match the DNA on Sarah's clothes. It seems the kids had simply seen the car driving by and mistakenly assumed the killer was inside. In fact, none of them could recall for certain whether they had seen a man get into a car from the bushes. In the days that followed, police continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but made no significant progress. Despite the horror of the event, classes resumed on Monday. The fact that the murder had occurred just a short distance from their school and the killer remained at large with no known identity added to the unease. Afraid to walk alone, the girls were escorted to their cars or buses by the boys from the sports teams, ensuring they weren't left alone on the street. Approximately 70 potential witnesses were present at the school and its surroundings on the morning of the incident. Investigators interviewed each of them, but unfortunately, no new information came to light. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a composite sketch of the attacker was created and circulated to local newspapers and television stations. The case received widespread media attention, and over the next few weeks, the police received hundreds of testimony. Each tip was thoroughly investigated, but in every instance, it led to a dead end. One promising lead involved a man who matched the suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing, and the lead was eventually ruled out. The case remained stagnant for months, with the police dealing with a staggering 4,000 tips, but lacking the resources to effectively follow up on each one. As new cases emerged monthly, the investigators' attention was increasingly divided, further hindering progress on the case. When Sarah's family learned that the police was struggling to manage the influx of tips, they stepped in to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a tech company and successfully lobbied the company's management to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000 in the 1990s. This generous donation allowed the police to centralize and process the leads more efficiently, categorizing them for easy review. Despite their best efforts, however, every lead ultimately led to a dead end, and the case remained stagnant for years to come. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates prepared to graduate, and as a tribute to their friend, they raised a substantial amount of money to create a memorial in her honor. The memorial took the form of a bench featuring a metal casting of Sarah's belongings alongside a poignant photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Although the case was periodically reopened and re-examined in the years that followed, the outcome remained the same. The perpetrator remained at large. During this time, the police conducted thousands of interviews and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects, but all these efforts ultimately proved fruitless. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, a detective decided to utilize modern technology to aid in the investigation. He contacted a genetic genealogy company inquiring if they could help locate relatives of the individual who left DNA on the victim's body. The experts accepted the challenge, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Two main factors contributed to their failure. Firstly, genetic genealogy was still in its early stages, and the experts' capabilities were limited. For instance, they couldn't simultaneously search for both male and female relatives from the same DNA sample. If the DNA was from a male, they could only search for male familial connections and vice versa. Secondly, legal obstacles hindered their progress as various laws prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. The researchers the detective approached had spent years tracing the genetic family tree of the British passengers who arrived in the United States on the Mayflower in 1620. By analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found a link to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking the attacker's lineage proved extremely difficult, especially considering the passage of time. Although the Mayflower had only around 100 passengers, their descendants now number over 25 million. Despite the initial setback, this was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a crime. The detective gathered available information and identified several local residents with the surname Fuller. He showed them pictures of the men, but none were recognized by the witnesses, including a runner and 2 men who had stumbled upon the body as children. Next, the detective collected DNA samples from all the local Fullers and sent them to the lab. Although none of the samples matched the attacker's DNA, one surprising discovery emerged. One of the men was a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the Mayflower. However, he was not the killer and had no knowledge of any distant relatives living nearby. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. In 2011, a company had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant, and the new team reached out to them. Given the significant advancements in genetic material study capabilities, the experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. Over the next 2 years, they painstakingly worked through public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually traced their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. After eliminating several thousand individuals, they finally got a break in September 2019. They identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts concluded that it was highly probable that a DNA sample found on Sarah's clothing belonged to one of the brothers at the time of the murder. The older brother, Edward, was a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses, and his DNA profile was already in the FBI database, ruling him out as a suspect in Sarah's murder. The younger brother, Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, But his DNA sample was not in the database because it was collected before the DNA profiles of offenders were added. The detectives put 55-year-old Patrick under surveillance right away. 2 days later, they got their chance. Patrick went to the laundromat, and then while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. When he was done, he carelessly threw the butt on the ground. One of the officers quickly picked it up and put it in an evidence bag, then returned to his car. Patrick repeated this process, stepping outside to smoke again, and this time a cloth handkerchief accidentally fell out of his pocket. The police thought it wise to take this second piece of evidence just in case they couldn't get a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. As it turned out, the forensic experts had no problem obtaining samples from both items. The next day, they had the long-awaited news for the detective. Patrick's DNA matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing back in 1991 perfectly. The judge immediately issued a warrant for Patrick's arrest, and the police took him into custody. It took investigators 5 days to identify the suspect and formally charge him with murder. Once his biography was made public, an obvious question arose. Why had a man with such a criminal history not been considered a suspect for 28 years? Patrick Nicholas, at 19, had attempted to assault a young woman who managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming to safety. He was later arrested and spent 4 years in prison. In 1994, he was arrested again for trying to assault a minor, but his DNA was not recorded in any database because the charge was not serious enough. Over the next 3 decades, his name never surfaced during investigations, and he didn't appear in over 4,000 leads. It was eventually revealed that genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller because Patrick was adopted and grew up with a different surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him as he was only 12 years old when the body was discovered, and the perpetrator had seen his face for many years. The witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not start until 2023. Despite claiming innocence, the main piece of evidence, his DNA on the victim's clothing, was a major obstacle. His lawyer attempted to argue that the presence of Patrick's DNA did not necessarily mean he was guilty, but this claim was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this entirely unreliable. In the end, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation on May 25th. He received a prison sentence of 45 years and 8 months, effectively ensuring he would never be released. At the sentencing, Patrick remained emotionless in contrast to Sarah's family, who thanked the judge, trial participants, and investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. The case of Natalie Connolly. In the picturesque English countryside, a story of love and betrayal took a tragic turn, leaving a young mother's life in jeopardy. This is the story of Natalie Connolly, a tale of domestic abuse, resilience, and the pursuit of justice amidst unimaginable cruelty. Natalie, a devoted mother and partner, found herself trapped in a cycle of abuse that would culminate in a harrowing ordeal. Her story stands as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking behind closed doors and the courage required to break free from the shackles of domestic violence. Natalie Connolly was a captivating beauty, both in appearance and charm. Her identical twin sister shared her lovely looks and deep connection. Natalie had a natural talent for bringing joy to others, easily sparking laughter and engaging in conversation with everyone she met. Despite the challenges of being a single parent, Natalie was wholly devoted to ensuring her daughter Madison had everything she needed. Natalie's unwavering dedication as a mother was evident in her constant presence and adoration for Madison, which fostered a strong admiration from her daughter. In a bustling bar, Natalie met John, a charming and debonair man who immediately caught her eye. Their connection was instantaneous, drawn together by an undeniable magnetic pull. Despite John being in his late 30s, his charm and wit quickly captivated Natalie's heart. Before long, they exchanged contact details, eager to explore their budding connection and spend more time together. Natalie found herself irresistibly attracted to John from the moment they met, though initially unaware of his occupation or wealth. As they grew closer, John revealed his status as a multimillionaire, a fact reinforced by his extravagant displays of affection. Lavish gifts flowed freely from his generous hand, and their evenings together were filled with luxurious dinners at high-end restaurants. His opulent mansion seemed to be plucked from a fairy tale, leaving Natalie spellbound by his refined and gentlemanly demeanor. Contrary to the charming facade John projected, he harbored a trove of hidden truths. It soon came to light that John's life was far more complex than he had let on. Amidst his engagement to a pregnant partner with whom he anticipated their second child, John concealed the existence of 3 additional children. His involvement with Natalie was revealed to be an affair that persisted even as he navigated the dissolution of his prior relationship, ultimately choosing to redirect his focus towards her. Their romance unfolded like pages from a fairy tale from the onset. John and Madison formed an instant bond, while Natalie effortlessly won over John's children, showering her with lavish gifts and luxuries like spa days and a personal chauffeur. John seemed to fulfill every dream imaginable, yet amidst the opulence, reality set in. When Natalie moved in with John on his estate in Kinver, Staffordshire, England, their relationship was initially fueled by passion. However, living together revealed the true nature of their dynamic. True understanding emerges when you share every aspect of your daily lives. John's preferences leaned heavily towards the rougher side, reminiscent of scenes from the 50 Shades of Grey series, much to Natalie's discomfort. He derived pleasure from causing her pain during intimate moments, often leaving visible evidence of his aggression in the form of bruises and cuts. The extravagant dinners and romantic gestures began to lose their appeal when Natalie realized the steep emotional cost they came with. What once seemed like a fairy tale now bore the stark reality of a tumultuous relationship. Despite her reservations, Natalie reluctantly acquiesced to John's demands during their intense encounters, driven by a fear of abandonment similar to what he had done to his pregnant ex-fiancée. Despite struggling with this significant issue, she found contentment within the relationship and hesitated to leave, fearing a return to the monotony of her previous life. Seeking solace and guidance, she confided in her sister and mother, revealing the wounds and bruises that bore witness to John's violent tendencies during their intense sexual encounters. While acknowledging John's prowess in the bedroom, she also disclosed the distressing reality of his penchant for inflicting pain. Natalie found herself torn between the pleasure John provided and the harm he caused. She was caught in a dilemma, struggling to reconcile her desire to maintain the lavish lifestyle with John and her dissatisfaction with the intimate aspect of their relationship. Signs of strain became apparent as both Natalie and John sought connections outside their partnership. John engaged in conversations with other women, while Natalie also found herself messaging other men. When John uncovered Natalie's exchanges, his reaction was one of fury. While he didn't hesitate to pursue interactions with women himself, he vehemently opposed Natalie's involvement with other men, revealing a glaring double standard in their relationship dynamic. However, he remained silent, masking any signs of unease. On December 18, 2016, John proposed what seemed like a normal evening together: drinks, watching a football game, and sharing supper. He ensured Natalie had an abundance of alcohol and even provided cocaine, though to a lesser extent than he consumed himself. This wasn't the first time he had orchestrated such a scenario, suggesting a pattern of behavior aimed at loosening her up before subjecting her to his despicable actions once they were alone at home. Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions may have been an attempt to numb herself to the anticipated pain she knew she would endure once behind closed doors with John. For him, maintaining absolute control was paramount, ensuring he could fully indulge in his intentions towards Natalie without compromising his faculties. He meticulously regulated his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a state of mild intoxication that wouldn't impede his actions during their sexual encounters. Following a seemingly delightful day out, culminating in a satisfying meal at one of their favorite establishments, John arranged for their driver to transport them home. However, beneath the facade of normalcy lurked John's sinister and malevolent intentions for that day. Natalie's intoxication was clearly evident, and the meal had not helped sober her up or absorb the alcohol. Disoriented, she stumbled out of the car upon their arrival home, inadvertently leaving her phone behind. The responsible course of action would have been to provide her with water and guide her to bed to sleep it off. However, John Broadhurst had far darker intentions in mind. Upon the driver's return with Natalie's phone, it remains unclear whether John accessed her messages. Subsequent toxicological testing and autopsy results painted a grim picture of Natalie's state. Despite her incapacitation, John was resolute in his desire for retribution, disregarding any potential consequences. Natalie became the unwilling recipient of his brutal advances as he orchestrated her suffering to inflict maximum harm. He subjected her to a barrage of violence, including punches, kicks, stomps, and the act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To compound her agony, he used a bottle of carpet cleaner as a weapon, twisting and tearing at her. Once he had finished his cruel assault, he abandoned Natalie, naked and blooded, at the base of the stairs, her skirt pulled up around her waist, left to succumb to her injuries. She lay in a pool of her own blood as John callously retreated to bed. Hours later, upon awakening, he discovered Natalie lifeless, having succumbed to the numerous horrific wounds inflicted upon her, totaling a staggering 40. John's subsequent actions, including his unconvincing performance during the emergency call for an ambulance, revealed his warped psychological state. His detachment and lack of remorse were chillingly evident, as he casually informed the operator of his futile attempts at CPR, referring to Natalie's lifeless state with callous indifference. Following Natalie's pronounced death, he was apprehended by authorities. In a feeble attempt to justify his heinous deeds, he offered the excuse of rough sex gone too far, claiming innocence and alleging that Natalie had actively consented to the extreme acts inflicted upon her. According to John's twisted narrative, Natalie purportedly requested the injuries, the violence, and even the insertion of the carpet cleaning bottle into her body, and she purportedly reassured him, amidst the blood and pain. He claimed that she reassured him of her well-being and expressed a desire for more of the same. Painting himself as a mere pawn in her tragic demise. John attempted to deflect responsibility by asserting that Natalie willingly participated in rough activities, claiming they had engaged in similar encounters numerous times without issue. When questioned about leaving her partially clothed at the foot of the stairs, he offered the feeble excuse that it was a routine occurrence and that he had never provided blankets, as the house was consistently warm throughout the proceedings. John displayed a notable absence of remorse or contrition, instead placing blame squarely on Natalie's shoulders. Despite being found guilty of manslaughter, he received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, serving only 22 months before regaining his freedom. The Natalie Connolly case sparked widespread criticism, leading Fiona McKenzie to launch the We Can't Consent to This movement. McKenzie aims to ignite discussions on sexual assault and eliminate the rough sex defense, which trivializes violence in relationships. However, some still accept the court's decision, viewing it as an isolated incident rather than a systemic issue, risking victim blaming. This highlights the need for advocacy and education to challenge harmful narratives and support survivors. The rough sex murder defense was unequivocally prohibited with the passage of the Domestic Abuse Bill by Parliament on July 6, 2020, following the granting of royal assent on April 29, 2021. The Domestic Abuse Act of 2021 represents a crucial step forward in addressing and combating domestic violence, ensuring that perpetrators can no longer exploit such harmful defenses to justify their actions. Natalie's untimely death left a profound void in the lives of her family and friends, who continue to grapple with the pain of her loss. Their unwavering love and support for Natalie serve as a testament to her enduring spirit. In the aftermath, the community rallied together to raise awareness about domestic abuse and to support survivors in their journey towards healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion stand as a beacon of hope in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Though Natalie Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her memory lives on in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. May her story inspire us to stand against domestic abuse and to offer support to those in need. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.